Okay, so let's talk about The Courier. This is a Cold War espionage thriller that's based on the true story of Greville Wynne, who was this travelling salesman from England who did a lot of business in Eastern Europe in the 1950s and was enlisted by MI6 in 1960 to smuggle Soviet secrets from Moscow to London from their best mole inside the Khrushchev regime, under the auspices of going out there on business trips. Now, the premise for this film is it's sort of vaguely reminiscent of Steven Spielberg's Bridge of Spies, in that you have someone who is very definitely not a government agent working as a sort of clandestine go-between. Though obviously in this case the loyalties are much more clearly drawn. So the Soviets have no idea of Greville's true purpose. He's not there as a negotiator. He's there purely to ferry the secrets in and out of the country from under their noses. Now, the whole point of the mission is that MI6 are choosing someone like Greville who the Soviets will never suspect. And so they alight on this guy who's played by Benedict Cumberbatch in probably my favourite performance of his since Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy. Here is Mr. Cumberbatch having a very one-sided conversation with Angus Wright and Rachel Brosnahan's MI6 and CIA agents over lunch, in which he very gradually cottons on to who these people actually are and what they might be asking him to do.
Forgive me, I'm just a bit... Sorry, James, I know you said you had an office in the Board of Trade, but is it possible you actually work at a different branch of Her Majesty's government? Oh my. This is unexpected. I'm sorry, I don't understand why. I'm just a salesman.
And to that, Rachel Brosnahan replies, exactly. Now, I think you can tell from that clip alone why this Cumberbatch performance is so good. But there's another moment that perhaps crystallises it even more powerfully. So early in the film, he answers the phone by saying his name. And it's one of those perfect line readings that tells you everything you need to know about the character in one go. It's just this kind of Greville Wynne. There's a kind of a sing-song playfulness to it also, but also this degree of hesitance. I think it's as if he's not sort of yet worked out in life. You know, the guy's in his 40s, but he's not yet quite settled on just how seriously he wants to be taken as a person, or perhaps even how seriously he takes himself. And this kind of reminded me a lot of Robert Donat in the 39 Steps. So he's this unassuming, companionable, unthreateningly suave figure, this classic Alfred Hitchcock-style wrong man, in every respect but one, which is that in this film, he is actually the right man. It's directed by Dominic Cooke, who's this veteran of the theatre, former artistic director of the Royal Court, who's actually making his second foray into film directing here. He directed that slightly faltering adaptation of On Chesil Beach in 2018. And barring this interesting tonal swerve towards the end, which we'll come to, The Courier is mostly made in this very classical, old-fashioned style, which pairs really nicely with Cumberbatch's very classical, old-fashioned performance. It's not this big auteur, grotty delve into mid-century style like Bridge of Spies or Thomas Alfredson's Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy, but it does have this very convincing Le Carré-like feel to it throughout. This comes across really powerfully when Greville first arrives in Moscow, and he makes contact with his source, Oleg Penkovsky, who's brilliantly played by Merab Nenidze. The two men's initial conversation does feel like this faltering flirtation in this very Le Carré-like way. They're only able to finally come semi-clean with one another about who they are when they go down into this shadowy alleyway with these anonymous figures obliviously going about their lives in the overlooking apartment windows. Or are they just going about their lives? Or are they spying? You know, Penkovsky says, I've dreamed of this moment for a very long time. And he compliments Greville on his tie clip, which is this surreptitious signal that he's been given by MI6 to show that, you know, these two men are batting for the same side, as it were. And Greville's married to loving, understanding yet wary Sheila, who's played by Jessie Buckley. But it's his relationship with Penkovsky, who's codenamed Ironbark, that's at the very heart of the film. And there's a sense really beautifully created between the two actors that Greville sees Penkovsky as a client who becomes more of a trusted friend over the course of their relationship in ferrying these secrets out of the country. And that bond of personal loyalty is as powerful a motivating factor, I think, in Greville's actions as is averting nuclear disaster. Penkovsky's also got his own torn loyalties. He's, obviously loyal to his country as he's part of the Soviet regime, but also to his principal and to his family. That's also played really nicely by Ninidze. He always his performance makes him look as if he's always trying his very hardest not to look guilty. And he's just a great piece of casting, even down to, and this is going to sound like the most trivial, silly detail imaginable, but in the context of the film, it works beautifully. The actor, Ninidze, has this small but quite prominent mole on his forehead. And this kind of feels like this uncontrollable physiognomical tell. Like, this guy is the mole. It's literally written on his face. And he's this sense that he's a marked man. He's kind of going to be identified at any moment, plays beautifully into kind of the building air of paranoia that builds up around this mission. They have great scenes together. There are 2 visits to the ballet that work as these clever psychological pivot points in the film that are kind of like these clandestine dates on which they go on, in which realizations are made about the gravity of what's happening and the threat around them. So I mentioned this tonal shift earlier, where when the mission starts to go awry, that classical polish that we become used to starts to fade away, and it's replaced by this much starker, menacing contemporary visual style that really hammers home how high and dire the stakes have become for both of those men in the assignment. And it's during that final stretch of the film that Jessie Buckley is able to develop the role of Sheila from this faithful spouse stereotype into essentially the conscience of the film. And it's kind of like what Claire Foy does in First Man. We know the stay-at-home wife character. This is an established stereotype in these films about great men who go on to do great things. But there is much more going on here, and this character has her own very distinct perspective on this mission and its significance and to what it means to Greville and to the family unit as a whole and to the world at large. And by doing that, the film starts to feel more morally scouring in this modern way than it perhaps could have been had it stuck to that very stayed in the best possible way Hitchcockian style that it begins with. The suffering of Cumberbatch in those later scenes is far more vivid than a more throwback filmmaking style would allow, for example. And it matters to us because that core bond between Cumberbatch and Ninidze matters. They establish that, and with that relationship completely, buyable, completely moving, completely worth investing in, all of the rest of the, what's important about this thriller, the stakes, and everything else just kind of falls beautifully into place.